Hello and welcome into the Touchdown NFL podcast, week 3. Boys, we are flying. I feel like we're flying through the weeks. Week 3 already. It feels like the NFL is like part of the routine now on a Sunday, on a weekend. Just going in, and it's great to be back with you guys to discuss it all. Really. So yeah, I think the weekend's action, like I say, really is kind of like bedded in that we are back. I'd say. How do you guys feel about it, T? What about you? Was the Lions? The
No,
Lions
pretty
still
good.
still doing
Yeah,
well?
yeah. The Lions won the touchdown ball.
Yeah.
Obviously they won, but yeah, no, it's good. I like it. I feel like you're just back into a rhythm now. Everything's
Mm.
kind of you have your Sunday, everything's happening on the Sunday. You talk about it on the Monday, the Tuesdays, the Wednesdays, and then you're back into it on the next week with Thursday night football. So it's nice to be back in the rhythm. Sometimes it feels like it goes too quickly. But no,
Yeah,
it's good.
definitely.
Particularly this Sunday, I feel like so many different things were happening. Like particularly in the early window with so many games, it just felt like there were a million different things going on. So no,
Yeah.
it's good to kind of finally start feeling like it's like autumn's almost here. So that's kind of it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were just talking about the weather, weren't we? Just before we started recording that it's
Yeah, we were.
blinking
Yeah,
on
it's
a
nice.
bit of heat, but
Not nice for it to not be roasting, and it's kind of nice. We've got obviously the cool thing about where we're at the moment in the season is that like we got the London games like next week or this
oh
week,
yeah.
so it's just kind of like for me, like as somebody who was quite skeptical about that whole thing at the beginning, I've really kind of gotten into and going to these get obviously the Falcons are coming over, and I don't really want to think about the Falcons at the moment because for the first time in ages, I spent all Sunday going, oh man, Falcons are on later. We're winning games. Lions have got a few injuries. This is, and no, we're not. We're not even going to bother. Fair enough. But yeah, it's kind of like I do really like. They're a bit. They've got a bit of a stigma around them for not being great or not having not great teams, and sometimes being a bit sort of disappointing. But there's still something about them that still feels quite special. I do really enjoy going to those games, so I'm looking forward to that. Obviously, this
Mm.
weekend and the weekends following. But yeah, as you say, like 6 o'clock's finish, straight into red zone. I was disappointed that there are only 3 games on, which obviously is not going to be the case every week. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's good. It's good. It's a good. It's a good time. And like you say, it does kind of. You feel like it goes quite quick. Like you say, already 3 weeks in of a short season anyway. Trying to enjoy it while also looking ahead to what I can enjoy next. Anyway, rambling, but yeah, it's good. It's good. We're good.
Yeah, it is. It's great. It's great to have the NFL, in London, in the UK, in Europe, just to extend it out. Obviously, we've got the Frankfurt games coming up, and obviously that's going to extend over the coming years to be probably even further around the world, probably be quite global. Hence why the 17th game was introduced. But yeah, it's great to be there. Also extends the Sunday watching, doesn't it? You got the 2:30 game now in the UK kickoff. Obviously, that's the Falcons and Jags next week, and then you go in then to have your 6 o'clock slate, and then obviously your late slate as well. And if you're a night owl, then obviously straight into Sunday night football as well. So you've got like a whole day's worth of football, which you just can't sniff at, can you? Really, it's just fantastic to be involved in. So yeah, no, hope everyone who goes down to London, because obviously we won't speak to everyone before then, but I hope everyone who goes down to London this weekend has a great time, and yeah, gets to see some great action. Because like you say, does have a bit of a wrongful stigma in some ways of having like crap games or crap teams come over, but at the end of the day, like the Jags are good now. The Falcons have shown they can be exciting, so there's no reason not to be looking forward to this game on Sunday. I don't think. So
We'll see.
usual podcast format. we will see. We will. You've been pleasantly surprised over the first couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Last time you said you lost the touchdown ball, but there's hope. There's hope for both teams. Hope for both teams moving forward. As I was going to say, so yeah, usual podcast format. We'll talk about our big takeaways. We'll talk about our games of the week. We'll talk about some funnier moments when we meme or GIF moments, and then we'll go into our predictions. But yeah, we'll kind of dive straight in then. Taib, what's your big takeaway from this weekend's action?
So I think the Chicago Bears are broken. Like I'm not sure how after 3 games, like they were the worst team in the NFL last season by record. Obviously, they had the first overall pick and then traded it away. And yet through 3 games, they look even worse than what they were last season, which it wasn't exactly a big bar to clear, And then you look at the week they've had. Like it started with Justin Fields obviously like with that kind of curt press conference where come out with the one-liner coaching, and then obviously all hell broke loose after that. Defensive coordinator resigns after like weird allegations are made about him in the local media, and then he just kind of resigns in like a hush-hush press conference. And then I think like 2 days later, they had like thieves break in and steal like over £100,000 worth of equipment and gear. So not a great week, and then suddenly you've got to go to like the reigning Super Bowl champions, who probably needed a get-right game because the offense hadn't quite clicked, and they dropped 41 points and the Bears scored like 10. And it just, like, I'm hesitant to say it because like you always feel like prisoner of the moment, but they feel and look like Hugh Jackson's Browns, which I always thought were like the worst team that I've probably seen. And obviously I'm man that supports a team that was the first winless team in the history of the NFL, so like, obviously that Hugh Jackson's team, I think won one game in 2.5 years, that obviously had the second winless season in NFL history. And I don't know if I feel like, thing with like bad teams is like sometimes they have a lot of fight. So like you look at Arizona, they're probably short of a lot of talent, but like they've been close in all 3 games and eventually won yesterday. The Bears have just been like destroyed in every single game, and it feels like they've just lost all fight. I think this was the 13th game in a row they've lost, stretching back to last season. It's also the 13th game in a row where they've conceded more than 25 points, which, as I said, like it's just crazy. It feels like, and they got a lot of injuries now on the defensive side. The offensive line's banged up. Fields has got no confidence. Seems like all of Chicago's turned against Chase Claypool. Like there's no kind of, even in bad situations, I think like sometimes teams can hang on to something and like say, well, that's like a positive sign. I think right now there's just nothing positive at all. And it's kind of mad to think like they spent so much in free agency. They had like a lorry load of picks. A lot of people were saying like they would be like the second team in the NFC North, perhaps even win it. I think Mike Tannenbaum, I think, might have predicted them to win the NFC North, which looks ridiculous now. But like, and for it to be so bad so quickly, as I said, like normally seasons tend not to go off the rails until like you get to week 9, week 10, when players have like, I've had enough of this head coach. Like the messages just isn't going in. But it's only 3 weeks, and it feels like that's the same. They played like a team. Like, like in football, we say like they've lost the dressing room. It feels like there's just a disconnect between everybody there, like from the owners to the GM to the head coach to the coaches, the players. And at the moment, like as I said, like I feel like it could be on the cards. Like I can't see where they're going to get a win from, because they're not even close in these games. You can be bad and still be close in a lot of games. The Bears aren't even like competitive in any of these games, which is kind of probably the most worrying thing about it all.
Yeah, no, it's right, isn't it? I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head with a couple of things. In that it's not just the on-field stuff, and that's the most worrying aspect of it for me, And you've nailed all the aspects, but I don't need to repeat them. But Justin Fields coming out and saying coaching quite honestly,
yeah.
And that's just kind of just the writing on the wall for the whole franchise, isn't it? Really. And then obviously you got the off-field stuff. Matt Eberflus's whole thing is like he'll get people to play with effort, and he'll get people to work and be, play hard and things like that. And it's just not happening. It just, like you say, they just need to kind of burn it down and start again. Like you say, they're broken at the end of the day. And I think you're exactly right.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like I said, we see plenty of bad teams each season in the NFL. Like even like, for example, you look at the Texans. Like we know that this year is going to be a challenging year for them with so many new players, new head coach. They got a lot of injuries, but even they've shown like fight and kind of spirit and togetherness in a lot of those games. Arizona, the same. Where like the Bears, that's why I thought they'd be better this season, because they'd have that kind of togetherness. I didn't think they'd suddenly go from being like the worst team to winning 14 games, but I thought they'd probably win 6 or 7 and kind of show a lot of more like a kind of coming together as a team. And it just feels like they're getting further apart. And that's probably the worrying thing, is like, it feels like the whole franchise is just being torn in so many different directions, and nobody's really sure how to pull it back together. There probably isn't anyone in that building that can pull it back together.
Yeah.
I think the most concerning thing from where I was sat, yesterday, was just how quickly it took. I think it was Greg Olson on the sort of the co-coms, basically just going, maybe they've just got to do something to get a bit of confidence in Justin Fields. And it's like, this is like halfway into the second quarter. Like this is what, 9.5 sort of quarters into the season, and you're talking about just trying to find some sort of just something to hang on to for next week, not even for the rest of the game, just sort of like next week. And then, like, obviously the most damning thing was the fact that the Chiefs pulled their starters well early into the sort of third quarter. Annoying for me as somebody who's got the Chiefs defense in fantasy. I'm going to lose a close one because of it. But even then, they just kind of like they kind of struggled to move on. I mean, Fields kind of got banged up towards the end, and it all got a bit desperate for them. But yeah, that's a team that is in desperate need of just something to go right. Just one thing to go right, and then you can kind of go, right, let's try and get something else right. But they're a bit of a mess at the moment, and it's well, part of the course, I think, for Chicago. But yeah, tear it down and start again, kind of thing.
So just really quickly then, let's go around the table. What is the solution? Tell you what do you think is the thing that needs to happen for Chicago Bears to turn this round? Because it's not a one thing solution, is it? But
yeah, no,
what's like the biggest thing they need to do?
I think Matt Eberflus is gone. Like whether or not it happens partway through the season or at the end of the season, I think his time is up. I just think they need somebody like that people can like gravitate towards too, whether that's a head coach or the general manager. Like ultimately, again, like I'll go back to like what Dan Campbell is like. He's insane, but you know he's got kind of everybody like pulling towards him. You know, like he's like the general, and it don't matter where you run into, they'll all run through for him. I feel like the Bears need someone, but like that kind of force of nature, personality-wise, but they're not easy to come by. Like Matt Eberflus clearly knows his football. Do you know what I mean? Like he's been a head coach, he's been a coach for a long, long time in this league. When he was defensive coordinator in Indianapolis, that was a pretty good defense that they had there. So he clearly knows like his X's and O's. But I think the thing with the Bears, it's much more than just game planning for an opponent. I feel like they've got to try and bring an entire organization back together. As I said, because right now it feels like it's just everything's kind of splitting apart, and it's so quickly. Like remember when Urban Meyer, kind of everything went wrong in Jacksonville, but it kind of didn't start going really kind of toxic towards the end of the season. There was still a little bit of kind of hope. Like this is only 3 weeks in, and it's so kind of it's amazing how quickly it's gone wrong. But I think like personality wise, they've got to have someone that's going to like walk in chest out, you know, head up, and kind of take it all on. But I imagine it, you know, like it's probably going to be a complete reset in the offseason, new GM, new head coach, new quarterback, probably. Whether that's enough for it, I don't know. But I feel like they're going to have like someone with like a real big character to go in there, big strong personality to take it all on.
Well, what about you? What do you think?
It's like you say, like there isn't one area that you can look at. I don't think there's anything they can do this season, and unless it just suddenly clicks. If Justin Fields just becomes the player that we all wanted him to be 2 years ago, overnight, and he just strikes up this incredible rapport with DJ Moore, and they just start burning defenses, this season feels like a write-off, and it sucks because it's like you say, 3 games in, it's probably going to result in mass firings, change of quarterback next season. They're going to have the capital to sort of get, if they don't have the first overall pick, going to have the capital to move up to get the first overall pick, which again sucks because it means that it's kind of failed. But I don't have the answer. I'm racking my brain to try and think of somebody who sort of who can come in as the next head coach. But even then, you're looking at next year. This year feels like a write-off. Again, I don't know what they do. If I'm a Chicago Bears fan, I don't know why I'm watching this sport. If I'm a Chicago Bears fan, I'm just kind of like, when does it end? Because it's been like this. The one time it looked like they might have turned the corner, it was kind of fool's gold with Trubisky and what have you. Do you really want to? You've got to go through that again. It's just, I don't know. I feel bad. Everything has failed. What do you do? I don't know. I don't want to be. I don't know. Dan Quinn. Go get Dan Quinn, and try and do something with that defense to try and mask the offense for a little bit. I don't know.
See, I think I'd go the other way. I think I don't have a name for who this person is, but look, they, like you said, you've just named. Obviously, they got Mitchell Trubisky, okay, and they might have the number 1 pick, in a few months' time again. like you've got Justin Fields. Obviously, he wasn't like the number one pick or anything like that. But I just feel like cycling through another highly drafted quarterback doesn't solve the problem. So I feel like you've got to kind of try and get something out of Justin Fields and use that high draft pick. And the draft capital they obviously accrued last year with the trade with Carolina. They've got to use that to put a support system around it, because as much as DJ Moore, he's a number one receiver, he's a good receiver, he's a good player, they still don't have a good offensive line or a good enough offensive line. They don't have anyone outside of DJ Moore, really. They've got a couple of nice pieces here and there, but, it's not like game-changing guys. And we're going to talk about a couple of offenses who have multiple game-changing wide receivers or, pieces on their offense, or build up the defense to a point where it's like a scary defense again. They've got to go out and get someone to be a head coach who can build something around Justin Fields, in the same way that Shane Steichen has gone into Indianapolis and he is using Anthony Richardson's legs as a flaw. They can go out there when I know they won this week with Gardner Minshew, but their game plan is to use Anthony Richardson's legs, use athleticism, use it as a baseline, and then anything he does as a passer off the back of that is fantastic. And Anthony Richardson, as I kind of mentioned in my video in the week, is ahead of the curve in terms of a passer. They've got to get Justin Fields to that point where, he is a factor in the run game, and then anything off the back of the pass is kind of a bonus. They've got to get an offensive-minded head coach in there to kind of bring this out of it, because we saw it in college that he's a good quarterback when he's got that support system around him. You play for Ohio State, you've got the best guys in the Big Ten around him, most of the time, most of the way through the field. And you've got some of the best players in college football. They've got to create that environment around Justin Fields. And I think that's the way to go. Ryan Poles is probably safe. It's his first year in the job. He's made a big swing, making a trade trading away the number one pick. Got to give him time. You can't just keep cycling through GMs, quarterbacks. Obviously, I'm advocating for the head coach to go, but he's a defensive-minded head coach. That's what they've got to do, in my opinion. I think we've seen in recent times the success that young offensive-minded head coaches especially can have on, franchises that are labouring a little bit. I think that's the way they've got to go.
I think the one thing, before we move on, I feel like Fields has got to get himself out of there. Whether that means he's got to sit
he's
as
got a massive part to play. Yeah.
Whether he goes and sits as a backup somewhere else. I just feel like, because on the night he was drafted, obviously it was in April, maybe 10,000 people are at a White Sox game, and instead of watching the game, they're chanting Justin Fields. This isn't, in April, the first night he was drafted. I just feel like the environment there, he looks like a young man with no confidence. And this is where, you sympathize with these guys. The same with, Zach Wilson. Okay, they might not be good enough at this moment in time, but you've almost got to, stop putting them out there and taking these shellackings, because it's not doing him. I feel like he probably needs to go somewhere else. And as I said, a city like Chicago and a storied franchise like the Bears that have been a part of the NFL for 100 years, desperate for a quarterback, desperate for a savior at quarterback. I just feel like the situation has become kind of so, just insane. I think it would be difficult for an experienced quarterback if you put a Ryan Tannehill or someone like that that's been around for a long, long time, kind of been through the ups and downs. I think even someone like him would struggle there, just with kind of everything else, the insanity of the situation. I feel like Fields has got to get himself, even if that means sitting on the bench behind somebody. I think for the good of his own career, he's got to find somewhere else where he can just get his head down and not be scrutinized for every single thing he says or every single thing he does or doesn't do. But as I said, it's going to be hard. It's hard, obviously Darnold managed to do it and he left the Jets via Carolina. Now he's in a decent little spot in San Francisco, to try and rebuild himself. I feel like Fields has got to do the same, because this is only going to end up one way, where the Bears will eventually discard him and they'll draft somebody else. And for him, it's going to be harder and harder the longer he stays there, the worse he looks and the more confidence he loses to kind of find another landing spot.
Yeah, it's interesting. We'll have to keep our eyes on this one, because, like you say, the rot has potentially set in already, and this could be on the verge of getting really, really messy for the Bears. And obviously then, in a couple of more weeks' time, if they're 0-5 and they're then looking at the draft already, aren't they? And then it's questions around Justin Fields, whether he's going to be there. And then, like you say, depending on which way they go, it's either how are they building around him, or, as you say, who's the next guy and where is Justin Fields going to be next year. So definitely worth keeping an eye on for sure. We'll move then into my takeaway, and I did say last week that we shouldn't really talk about our own teams too much through one of being a bit more original. But I just, it's the Chargers' first win of the season. Let me take it. Let me talk about Justin Herbert for a little minute. My biggest takeaway of the weekend is just give Justin Herbert an average defense. Give me like the 15th best defense in the league every year, and the Chargers are going to be a problem. They're going to be dangerous. I think for me personally, Sunday versus the Vikings was the most complete Justin Herbert performance that I've ever seen. He completed 85% of his passes, 40 from 47 for 405 yards and 3 touchdowns. He made big throws. His pocket movement was incredible. Brian Flores blitzed him on about 82% of his dropbacks, and he just dealt with it all. And this was the result of an amazing game, just overall, a great neutral game. This was, as we talked about in the previous couple of weeks, we talked about it being the immovable object versus unstoppable force of Chargering versus Vikinging, if that's a word. And it was always going to be a crazy ending, and it absolutely was. But, the Chargers couldn't have won this game without Justin Herbert just being just almost perfect. He had a fumble, and he had one bad throw that really should have been picked off, ended up being a touchdown. But I really feel like that was just a little bit of karma coming around, because last year we saw so many games where Justin Herbert would throw a really nice pass, the receiver would tip it, and the defender would pick it off. This is kind of like the reverse of that, which was sweet. So my stance for now, I think, is I'm kind of out on the defense. I'm out on Brandon Staley a little bit. I'm going to put that on record. And I'm happy for Kellen Moore to get the head coach's job and just get an average defensive coordinator who won't just get gashed for big plays every other play. And like I say, just can give him the 15th best defense, because like I say, the Chargers would be making deep playoff runs with Justin Herbert playing like he is and just growing into that elite quarterback really in the top echelons of the game as time goes on.
Yeah, he was mad at the... Oh, sorry.
No, crack on, mate.
It was mad that they blitzed him so much, because they always say, like, you don't blitz, like, the top quarterbacks. Like, obviously, I haven't watched Rodgers, like, all my life. You never really blitzed him because he just destroys. Same with Mahomes. Like, Mahomes' numbers versus the blitz are insane. It was mad that they did it, but, like, Herbert was excellent. It was a weird game, this one. This was bizarre. Like, it really was just, like, I feel like Minnesota seem to have coughed the ball up so many different times. Like, right now, they can't just not turn the ball over, and then obviously the Chargers had their own issues, and obviously now Mike Williams has gone down. That's kind of a big blow. And it's a massive onus on him. But this was a good game. Herbert was brilliant. I feel for Herbert because, like, we all know he's, like, outstanding. Like, we all know he's really, really good. But the reason why he doesn't get talked about, like, alongside Burrow, Allen, and Mahomes is because, like, the rest of the team hasn't been as good since he's been there. Whereas, like, obviously you look at the Bengals, like, they've been outstanding for a number of seasons. The Bills have been good. Obviously, the Chiefs have been to 2 Super Bowls and won them. Like I said, but yeah, you should never ever doubt the quality of Herbert. He was ridiculously good yesterday. Even sometimes when the protections broke down, the way he scrambles out of the pocket, the way sidearm sling in the red zone to Donald Parham, when the defender was in his face for the first touchdown, that was brilliant. Like I said, he's a guy that makes outstanding plays every single week, and it's just kind of a pity that, like, nothing else seems to kind of click around him as much as maybe it ought to. But for as long as you've got him and, like, you give him a shot, he's always going to make really big throws and really good plays in big moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just on Herbert, sorry. And just on Herbert, I'm old enough to remember when Philip Rivers was doing obscene things with the Chargers, and the only reason he wasn't getting into the playoffs because their special teams was the worst in the league. So it's just kind of like, this is, again, talk half of the course. This is Chargers in its absolute fine, most distilled form. You have an exceptional quarterback and you just can't get him anywhere. But no, he's great. Just want to come back to something that I mentioned last week. Is that another one score loss for the Vikings? This is a game that they win last year, probably because they've got the rubber green. And that final 30 seconds or whatever it was, where they decided to just run the entire clock down to get one play off for no reason, was absolutely ridiculous. And again, not to... That's the sort of thing that in another situation, coming off the back of another season, is added to a dossier of reasons why you're getting fired tomorrow, kind of thing. I'm not saying that's what's happening in Minnesota, but it's just kind of like, these are the things that they had go their way last season. It's going to be like this for the rest of the season. It's the one good thing that I've got called so far, so I'm running with this for the rest of the year. Minnesota are going to lose loads of games by stupid reasons, and this is it. Listen, that was the one I came off the Falcons, and obviously flicked straight over to red zone, and this was the one that Scott Hansen was going bananas about. So it's just kind of like, I'm glad that we're getting these games, these sort of really tight, down to the wire. Again, can't be good for our health if you're involved in those fixtures. But just as a neutral, those are the ones where you look at and go, man, this is exceptional content. So pleased for you, pleased that Justin is actually getting somewhere, and hopefully this will kind of kickstart something for the rest of the year. But Vikings are going to be a weird team this year for all the wrong reasons, rather than what they had last year.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, given their dues, like Kirk Cousins actually played pretty well. He had a little bit of the kind of Chargering look that, just dropped a bad position, bad points in the game. Turning the ball over with fumbles and things like that. Should have had a fumble on Madison that wasn't given. Just things like that, like you say, just standing in their way. Bad, process management towards the end of the game, as you kind of mentioned. It's just not great. Just doesn't kind of do them any justice. And like you say, they're just not getting that rub of the green. Just kind of go back and give some numbers on the Herbert blitz kind of numbers. He was blitzed on 38 passes. He completed 32 of them for 307 yards and 3 touchdowns. So like you say, I mean, that's just a good performance in itself, isn't it? That's just against the blitz. So he's the first quarterback since Next Gen Stats have been doing what they do to have over 300 yards against the blitz. So just kind of shows that, like you say, Taib just shouldn't blitz these elite quarterbacks because they've just got answers and they can just get themselves out of situations and hurt teams. And Brian Flores just didn't really learn his lesson, to be honest with you. So kind of says it all, really.
Well, he won't do it again.
I'm pretty sure he will. It's Brian Flores how he called the game, I guess. Anyway, we'll go from one great game to another great game in a completely different way. And obviously, we need to talk about the Miami Dolphins and the Denver Broncos. So, Will, I'll take it away on this one. This is obviously your big takeaway.
Yeah, I mean, Dolphins are as good as advertised for now. I've made no secret of my dislike for Sean Payton as a coach and as a human being. What a joy that was to see him. Little thing that I saw yesterday actually was Mike McDaniel was a ball boy at the for the Denver Broncos as a young man. Had obviously the Broncos job was available at the same time he was interviewing with the Dolphins, and they chose to not offer him an interview. What better way to just sort of go, here's what you could have won, kind of thing. Because that was I was blissfully ignorant to what was going on until my phone just blew up, as it tends to do. As the Dolphins are pulling their starters and their backups are putting up 50 fancy points or something stupid. And it's not like you can turn around and go like, I mean, you can turn around and go, let's say the Broncos were awful because they were. But like 20 points scored from an offense, you kind of go, that's not great, not terrible. But like you look over to the other side and it's just, it's 70 points. And the Broncos haven't been good for a while, but they've always had a bit of something about them where you can never really count them out. This was the first time where it kind of, to me at least, kind of felt like the sheen was off, like anybody could go up against them and get a result, kind of thing. Again, easy to say when you've got Tua looking exceptional, when you've got Tyreek Hill, who is very good, you've got Waddle, who is obviously the running back room is just incredible. Really unbelievable. The most disappointing thing was the decision to not try to break the all-time points scoring record. When you've scored 70 points, the moment in which you can turn around and say we're being respectful has gone. Like that went about 40 points ago. You're now doing this to prove a point. You can't just stop there and just go, no, I've done enough, kind of thing. Like, just get it done. Let's have some fun with this. And for the Broncos, where do you go now? Like, I'm just going to throw that because I don't know how do you get up for the next game if you've just conceded 70 points? Like, what do you do? because that's you can't come back from that, like mentally or but just to go back to what I was trying to talk about at the beginning, if the Dolphins can keep Tagovailoa healthy, upright for the rest of the season, I mean, clearly they're unbeatable with that combination. That they're in for a good ride. It's just keep him healthy for all of our sakes, please, because it's so much fun when they're doing that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it made the Chargers look relatively competent in week 1, considering we only gave up 34 points. So yeah, I'm here for it. I'm here for anything that 36 points, shall I say? Yeah, I'm here for it. It's really entertaining football. It's not great from my perspective. It's probably not too bad for you guys because you're in the NFC. But yeah, our playoff road is probably going to go through this team, which doesn't fill me with joy, if I'm honest with you. I'm going to set out this little conversation for a second because it's my game of the week. So I'm going to I'll let Tabe take over and I'll fire off my takes not too long in the future.
Well, I know, like, obviously Thomas asked, it was a rhetorical question, where do the Broncos go here? The Broncos are going to Chicago next Sunday in what is now perhaps the most anticipated game of this very, very short NFL season. Only in the NFL, right? The Denver Broncos opened up, I just checked the thing there. They're opening up as 3.5-point favorites, to go and win against. Which I don't know what this says anymore about, like, this game. Yeah, do you know what it is? I feel like Miami are going to give a few good hidings to some of the poorer teams in the league. Because the thing I think at some point is, like, the Broncos waved the white flag probably midway through the second quarter. And, like, do you really want to, like, run around chase Tyreek Hill or Raheem Mostert or Jalen Waddle or Braxton Berrios? Like, you just want to save yourself. It sounds bad, but, like, once you get into these types of games where, like, they had 35 points, I think, by the 2 minute. You're just not going to come back from that. Like, there's not enough possessions in the game left for you to stop them from scoring and basically score on every drive that you have between now and the end of the game. Like, it's right now they've got an answer for everything, and it's just speed. Like, it's ridiculous how fast a team they are. Like, yeah, it's electrifying to watch. Probably again, like, I'm interested to see. Because if you remember when in 2018-19, when the Chiefs and Rams were kind of the two offenses that were blowing everything up, and everyone was like, how are we going to stop this? How are we going to... And then eventually Belichick did, because they beat the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game and then beat the Rams in the Super Bowl. I'm intrigued as the season goes on, like, what the plan is going to be, because we've seen, like, over the last few years, teams defend people like Mahomes and Allen, like, really deep. Just go back, play a lot of quarters coverage, and just give them everything underneath. Don't give up any big plays. But the thing with Tyreek Hill is if you throw, like, a 6-yard pass to him, he's got the speed and, like, kind of the ability and agility to turn that into, like, a 20-yard gain. So, like, right now, like, I don't know how you stop them. And for the Broncos, I wouldn't want to be in that defensive film meeting because they're going to get an absolute like I've read the book, Sean Payton and Drew Brees. Thomas won't like it, but it's like an inside look on how their relationship worked in New Orleans, and that's a Hall of Fame quarterback, and Sean Payton was happy to give him real stick when he thought he played below standards. And as I said, that's a guy who's going in the Hall of Fame, maybe the greatest New Orleans Saint ever. So those Broncos are going to get roasting tomorrow when they go in.
Yeah, absolutely. Where the Broncos go from here is, I would love to get a penny for Nathaniel Hackett's thoughts as well, because I'm sure he would have some things to say about Sean Payton's dirty hands all over this loss, as to quote him.
That's the week after the Bears game. I think it's the week 5 game that the Broncos have. The Broncos will play the Jets in week 5, and obviously the Jets are kind of not in disarray because ultimately Rodgers goes down after 4 plays. Zach Wilson is Zach Wilson at this stage, and there's no point like belaboring the point. He just isn't very good. So like that's going to be an interesting one because it's like, well, that defense is really bad because the Broncos gave up 30-odd points to Washington the week before, and obviously they just gave up 70 to Miami. Still feels weird saying that 70 points, like, there's basketball teams that don't score that many points in a game.
Yeah, that is true. That is true.
The idea of Nathaniel Hackett, so watching that, going, "What have you done? What have you done to my boy? This isn't what we were about." Come on.
So I'll just kind of segue off this because obviously it's my game of the week is this. So I'll just go. Obviously, from the Miami side, it's outrageous, right? I've got a few close friends who are Dolphins fans, and I was getting texts about this, obviously, as they were running up the score. One in particular was quite annoyed that they didn't just kick that field goal, because obviously they were in field goal range at the end, obviously just kneeled, and they could have. And I don't really understand that either. Why they wouldn't just, like you say, it was long past the point of no return, of being respectful. A couple of things that I've kind of looked up since is that the Dolphins had 726 yards of offense, which, when hearing that on the broadcast, I was obviously watching the Sky coverage. It was on at the same time as the Chargers game. I heard this afterwards, that they have 726 yards of offense, and I almost fell off my chair at that. I thought I misheard it, so I had to look it up. The Titans on the season have 721 yards of offense. So kind of shows you the polls that we're dealing with here. Obviously, it's fantastic. The Dolphins' number one offense for the season, not just this week, and they do look unstoppable. They look absolutely unstoppable. However, to kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate here, the answer in the previous iteration of this was to get physical with them at the line of scrimmage, and now they just use loads of motion to get past it. I kind of thought that was the way they came out against the Chargers. They did. They were really, really successful about it. Someone will figure out a way to do this. I'm a bit surprised that Belichick didn't. He probably just didn't have enough tape on it. But the second matchup with the Patriots is going to be really, really interesting. And the other thing is, I want to put something on the screen that I'm sure producer Kieran will do for me. It's a tweet from Stephen Ruiz that will go on now, which shows the next gen stats pass chart from Tua. In that he threw 3 touchdowns out of his 4 touchdowns from behind the line of scrimmage. I don't know. To me, Tua is playing amazingly. I'm just going to go on record and say that. However, I do think he's the weak link still. I think he's an extension of Mike McDaniel on the field, in the same way that, Will, you'll know this, how Kyle Shanahan can be basically just controlling the quarterback, and he can kind of be Brock Purdy on the field as an extension. Obviously, you had that with Matt Ryan. He's a little bit of a better quarterback than Brock Purdy. Tua is potentially still going to be a problem. He still doesn't throw to the left-hand side of the field, which you'll see on the tweet that I'm hopefully getting Kieran to put in. And they're just using a lot of speed. If someone figures out how to cover these guys, and I'm not the person who's doing that because I'm not a defensive coordinator, they'll run into issues. I'm going to kind of call it there. However, Dolphins fans, enjoy your day in the sun, your season in the sun, potentially, because the other thing that I want to kind of come back to this and kind of get back onto the positive side of the Dolphins is, I want to put it to you guys. Should they be, or are they, Super Bowl favorites now? Because they're just blowing everyone away. And if someone doesn't figure out, like I essentially think they might, they're just going to be able to walk all over everyone, right?
If I could take the easy way out for this question, can we address this after they play the Bills this weekend? It's going to be for the rest of forever, or at least until he retires, I'm always going to say that the Chiefs are the favourites to win the Super Bowl, because I've decided that Patrick Mahomes is the best player to ever play the game, and I've got to die on that hill. So that's for as long as he is still their quarterback, and for as long as the Chiefs are still good, I have them as the number one. And I don't want to sort of totally backtrack on a lot of the things I was saying not 5 minutes ago, but we are only like 3 games into the season. Let's calm down on the Dolphins. They might not be that. No. It's kind of if they can keep it up, if they can keep Tua healthy, if they can keep their receivers sort of from picking up knocks, and if they can just keep finding ways to get people open space, there's no reason why they can't score lots of points on lots of teams, be they bad or good. So, I mean, I guess they have to be, you have to by default have them in that conversation of, I mean, we talked at the start of the season of the top sort of 3 or 4, maybe 5 teams, probably maybe start to look at pushing them into that conversation. Are we, like, I would reframe the question as, are they in the same bracket as Chiefs, Bills, I don't know, maybe not Bengals at the moment, but Eagles, 49ers, and I think on the evidence that they have presented to us this season, so far this season, probably yes. But it's going to be interesting to see how things go down when they start to come up against those teams, and if they can hold their own, and if they can sort of take wins off of them, then all of a sudden you start to look at how they sit within that tier. So to answer your question, I'm not going to answer your question because I don't want to look any more silly than I already do.
Dave, what do you reckon?
I think I think it could be maybe perhaps a little bit more like matchup dependent on who they end up playing. Like this is why, like I'm just having a look on the 2022 season. In December, they played the 49ers, the Chargers, the Bills 3 weeks in a row. They lost all three of those games. The offense didn't score more than 20 points in all three of those games. Sorry, they scored 29 against Buffalo, but still lost in that shootout. They scored 17 against the Chargers on the Sunday Night Football and 17 against San Francisco. So for as much as like right now they're posing so many kind of unanswerable questions, I still think, as I said, I feel like whenever they play New England next, might reveal a lot more. Like go back to the Rams, the Rams were kind of blowing teams away with points, an avalanche of points in 2018. And then they played a Sunday night game in Chicago, freezing cold, and they really struggled. And that was kind of the blueprint that Belichick then followed in what he did in the Super Bowl. Like I feel like if someone's going to do it, it's going to come from the AFC East. It's going to come from one of Buffalo, the Jets, whose defense is very, very good. For as much as they got problems on offense, their defense is legit. And I feel like Belichick, again, you say that thing of, I think once he's got more tape on it, he'll formulate a plan probably a little bit better. They weren't terrible against Miami last week, It wasn't like Miami put 40 on them or just ran away with the game. They just couldn't get enough key stops. So I feel like it really might really depend on who they end up playing in the playoffs, because like if they ended up playing like a Colts team or a Titans or a Jaguars, you'd think maybe that's an avenue to get a playoff win and get up and running. Obviously they've already beaten the Chargers. Who knows? 17 weeks from now, things might change. Injuries happen, but obviously they've already put 37 points on the Chargers. The Chiefs' defense is probably the interesting one, because I actually think that defense is pretty good, although it's pretty young. And Spagnuolo, a bit like Belichick, you feel like the more he watches something, he'll probably get more of an idea. So I wouldn't go as far as to say they're Super Bowl favourites yet. I still want to see how they play in November and December when there's more tape on them. Because as I said, it's not like they're doing anything. It's not like rocket science what they're doing. It's just so hard to stop, because you look at every single offensive play. They've got a guy in motion, and they've next gen stats prove it. They've got the fastest group of skill group players in the league. So those guys are running, like, by the time Tyreek Hill's done a motion out of the backfield, he's probably already at 10, 12 miles an hour against a static cornerback or a static linebacker. So it's going to be how they can take that away from them. So that's why I feel like there's still probably more questions to answer, particularly when they go up against some of the really top defenses in the AFC, especially having to go up in the cold weather games. If they have to go to New York or Buffalo late in the season, historically that's been tough hunting ground for Tua and these Dolphins. So I'm a bit like Thomas, because you believe in the Chiefs because they've been there and done it twice. You're not ready to say somebody else is the favorite. But I think if you're going to beat Miami, you're going to have to take them so far out of their comfort zone and turn it into kind of a struggle. If it becomes a shootout, Miami are going to win against everyone. So still more answers for me.
Few people sitting on the fence on this podcast today.
It's hard to say after 3 weeks.
Yeah, of course. But this is what we're here to do. We're here to fire off takes.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll get into that later down the line, because, like you say, it's definitely worth keeping an eye on. I think we're kind of really singing from the same hymn sheet, the three of us. To be honest with you, we need more. We need more information. We need more data points in the season. I'm sure. Like you say, the AFC East coaches will be gathering those at a rate of knots. Let's move into another game, because I'm sure we'll talk about the Dolphins plenty if they keep racking up points like this. Taib, what's your game of the week?
So my game of the week was kind of a miserable game of the week with the weather and kind of the quarterback play. I was actually pretty excited for this game, because I thought the Patriots might start 0-3, and obviously they kind of squeaked out a victory at the buzzer. As I said before, with Zach Wilson, I think my kind of big issue with this one is they had 3 possessions late on in the game in a 1-score game, and I feel like, say for example, I watched Matthew Stafford when he was young on a bad team, and in those situations, Stafford would make a lot of mistakes. He had a live wire arm, he'd throw it all over the place. But in kind of 1-score games, fourth quarter, let's get this together and pull out a victory from the jaws of defeat. And Zach Wilson had 3 opportunities, and they just couldn't get the job done. It wasn't like the Patriots were amazing on offense. They scored 15 points. That game was 15-13. They had 3 possessions with plenty of time left on the clock. And I just feel at this point now, I don't know how the Jets do it, because they got money tied up in Rodgers and other people that they brought in alongside Rodgers. But I think they've got to move on just for the sake of Wilson, because again, like at this point, it's not doing him any good. Like we know he isn't a starting quarterback in the NFL, but you keep putting him out there, particularly against the Patriots, who I think Wilson's stats are ridiculous against the Patriots. I had it here. I'm just written on my phone just for a second. Let's have a quick look. He's took 14 sacks in 5 games against the Patriots, completing just 50% of his passes. As I said, it's kind of that particular matchup is a nightmare for this Jets offense, particularly Zach Wilson. He got pressured, I think, like over 60% of the time yesterday, and I think the one thing with him is he invites a lot of pressure because he holds onto the ball so long. Like when his first read or his kind of hot read is taken away, he kind of holds onto the ball because he's not quite sure, and he's waiting. And that's where, again, like the pocket can become a mess. That Jets offensive line's already injured. Dwayne Brown's gone to IR now. They're moving Becton in and around from right tackle to left tackle. So, like, it's hard because, like, I feel for the Jets because the season promised so much and it basically, like, unraveled in 4 plays, which, like, you know, like, I was seeing it on the Monday night and thinking someone somewhere in New York has smashed one almighty mirror. Because this isn't 7 years worth of bad luck. This is like you get an MVP, Hall of Fame quarterback. He gets injured after 3 plays, and unfortunately, I think we know what Zach Wilson is, and he just is an error-prone quarterback. There will be some good throws that make you think, like you can see why they took him second overall, but there's just not enough like consistency with it. Like you ask him to like throw a 6-yard slant, and he probably couldn't do it as consistently as he ought to for his draft status and the fact that this is his 3rd season in the NFL. And it just feels like it's hard, and like seeing the body language of some of the people afterwards, like that defense played a really good game, like a really, really good game considering their offense really didn't give them much. And to go down with another defeat, and as I said, it's just difficult now. And that game was kind of ugly. It was really ugly. It was the kind of game, if the Jets are going to make anything in terms of getting the wild card race, that's the kind of game they're going to have to win. You know, 1-score, low-scoring game. Just hope that the quarterback doesn't mess it up. And ultimately, in 3 in the crucial situation, wasn't good enough to get the job done.
Yeah, just didn't get enough done on 3rd down. Didn't get enough per play. 2.8 yards per play. 2 out of 14 3rd down conversions. It's just not good enough, is it? Like you say, and really, like you say, the Jets have just got to be looking towards next season now, surely, because you know you're going to be looking at, as we kind of just mentioned, the Bills and Dolphins, although they both can't win next week. They're just going to kind of separate themselves, aren't they, from these other 2 teams in the AFC East? And the AFC has got some good teams, and you're just not going to get in there with 9 wins, I don't think.
No, I still don't think the Patriots are very good. Like I still think, like, offensively, they got a lot of questions to answer. It was an ugly game for Mac Jones. I said, like, weather conditions weren't great. Like, it was a bad game, but then how much leeway do we give that to 2 teams that are used to playing in outdoor conditions all the time? In that division, there's not an indoor stadium in that division, so they play at least 9 games in outdoor conditions at any point during the season, and they're used to playing in pretty difficult weather conditions. There was that famous game when Mac Jones threw 2 passes in the wind against Buffalo on a Monday Night Football a few seasons ago. So, like, you know, they are used to those types of games. But from a Patriots point of view, I just feel like pass rush is really good, defensive backfield's good, but, you know, unless Belichick can find, like, you know, some incredible answers, they're not going to win enough. Like, they're not going to score enough points to beat teams. They didn't score more than 20 points last week. They didn't score more than, like, if you're not scoring above that, you're not going to win any game in the NFL, no matter how good your defense is, because this league is so tilted towards offense. Like, you're going to have to score points at some point. And I just feel like they've not got the firepower or the kind of reliability in Mac Jones. You know, the mad thing is, it feels a bit like watching an offense from, like, 2003. Which, you know, like, the principles are kind of, I can understand it. Like it's, you know, like, it was being so successful for them, but when everybody else is, like, you know, throwing 100-mile-an-hour fastballs, they're still relying on being kind of cute and clever. They can't just kind of go, whack, there's a big play for a chunk gain. We're going to move the chains and be attacking you right here, right now. Like, it's not something that they can do. So, as I said, like, again, I worry about them in the wild card race. Defensively, they're going to be hard to beat. They're going to be really tough to beat. But I think, again, if they start playing from behind, they're not going to have enough to beat teams in kind of games that are skewed a bit more offensively.
Isn't this what they brought Bill O'Brien back in for, though? Like, his relationship with Mac Jones from like having that loose college relationship.
Yeah,
The idea of trying to get him to unlock another level that we haven't seen yet. I mean, Mac Jones, I think is fine. I think he is a fine
Yeah.
quarterback. I think there is probably a future where we're referring to whatever the bang middle of the quarterback tier listing is. It's going to go from what is it, the Dalton Cousins line to the Jones line kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think that's probably his future. Just on Zach Will, I mean, so much. The New York Jets have been searching for a quarterback since. I mean, number one since before I started watching this. Number two since before I was born. So I mean, it's just kind of like it's just like the constant just trying to find something, someone that you can sort of hang on to, and they just don't. It's kind of like the Bears in that like whoever goes there is going to have so much pressure on them to just be the guy, and it's just not going to work out. I mean, I saw Robert Saleh said earlier this afternoon that Zach Wilson is still their unquestionable number one, and it's just kind of like, how is that good for you? How is that good for him? Like, how is that good for the fan? Again, if I'm a New York Jets fan, why am I watching this? Because like it's just the same thing over and over again. This, like you say, it was a season of such high expectations or high hopes to be taken away immediately, and then for almost to be waving the white flag in week 2. They should have been sort of trying to get someone in the door fairly early. You've got allegedly very experienced quarterbacks offering themselves to the Jets, and the Jets turning around and saying, "No, we're good, we're okay at the moment." And I know that the pool out there isn't exactly sort of electric. I mean, I don't know how many games you're going to win with Nick Foles or, I mean, the corpse of Matt Ryan, but I mean, it's got to be better than this, right? Like, this is just kind of, this is, if I almost wish that there was a way that you could just swap the quarterback situations with these two teams. Number one, because it'd be hilarious to see Bill Belichick trying to coach Zach Wilson. But number two, almost the ideal remedy for what the Jets have at the moment is somebody as safe and risk averse as Mac Jones, just dumping it off and literally just trying to keep it going, because it feels like the season's over. Unlike the Bears, there are so many positives on the Jets that you kind of turn around and go, this is a travesty that they are in this situation.
Yeah. Like it sucks. Like you know, we all support teams that have been kicked while they're down. Like I couldn't imagine, like, say for example, like in my lifetime, like the most famous Jets quarterback is Mark Sanchez, and he's commentating now. Yeah. You know, like on players, like,
as well.
Yeah,
on the evidence yesterday.
You know what I mean? Like he's commentating now. Like Sanchez was drafted after Matthew Stafford, and then he's been commentating on Rams games. Like last week, he did the Rams 49ers game. So it's not like his career turned out massively brilliantly on the field, and he's the most famous Jets quarterback they ever had. And so they get a guy who's going as soon as he's eligible, he's in the Hall of Fame, and it kind of. And as I said, like it's too much for Zach Wilson. He's just like, maybe like I get like Nick Foles and Matt Ryan, and these people are kind of probably past their physical primes, but at least like they've got the maturity and the kind of know-how of being in an NFL offense and running NFL offenses that at least can bring just some calmness, rather than kind of the chaos that as I said, I do feel bad for him. Rex Ryan called him an immature jerk today on TV, which I mean, like, talk about like really going on, like on a 23-year-old kid. As I said, like it's. But again, a bit like you got to just take them on the firing line, and they got to find a way. Otherwise, it's just going to be like this. A lot of ugly one-score games that they fall on the wrong side of. And the thing with Jones is, ultimately, I think he's going to be as good as the people around him, like a lot of those Alabama guys are, because they play with like basically Pro Bowl caliber, all Pro caliber wide receivers at college. Like he's probably playing with a worse skill core in New England than what he ever did in Alabama. But that's on New England to work it out. And let's be honest, New England haven't had like a really good wide receiver or tight end since Gronkowski and Edelman. And let's be honest, Edelman wasn't exactly. It's not like Edelman's Justin Jefferson, you know. Like he was kind of a different guy, so much with his relationship with Tom Brady. So I think that's kind of the bigger issue for New England. Mac Jones is fine, as Thomas said, but he's only going to go as far as the people around him. And as I said, people like Tyquan Thornton and Devontae Parker aren't exactly going to break games wide open.
Yeah, so let's move on then into the shock of the weekend. Really, this was a massive shock, wasn't it? One that do the Cardinals even want to win this? Really, I don't know.
I'll try and keep this one sort of brief because I know that we're talking a lot. I could not believe what I was seeing from the Cardinals. This is the first time that I've had an opportunity to really watch the Arizona Cardinals this year. I was not anticipating seeing the Arizona Cardinals really at all outside of those like blooper reels and like, oh my word, how did you drop that kind of thing? But like, you forget how many like decent players Arizona acquired over the last couple of years. Like they got Hollywood Brown making catches. Zach Ertz, I forgot even existed. Couldn't believe what I was seeing from Joshua Dobbs, who I thought looked really sharp and on the ground looked much faster than I thought he was. The Cowboys have serious questions to ask because, as you say, is this a game they want to win? No, it's not. But I think the Cardinals probably have have acquired too many good players over the last couple of years for them to lose lots of games. And it's I don't want to take too much from one game. It's an off game for Dallas. Cardinals managed to get 100% out of 100% of their roster, all that good stuff. But it's the sort of result, and there were a sort of performance that makes me reevaluate who I think is going to have the number one overall pick come spring. I'm interested to see what happens in a couple of weeks if Kyler Murray is fit enough to come back in, because I don't necessarily think it's quarterback play that's the issue with the Cardinals at the moment. And that what an indictment that would be of his sort of career if they decide that they want to go with Dobbs over sort of Murray. I don't know. I was quietly impressed by what I saw, and I will also sort of caveat that by saying the Cardinals did everything they could to give the Cowboys the opportunity to win the game. Like it felt like the Cowboys had every chance to win the game, and they decided not to take it. So fair play. And yeah, I'll let you boys talk, but I was pleasantly surprised by the Arizona Cardinals of all people.
Go on, Tim.
Yeah, this was the feel-good story of the weekend. I mean, fair play to them. Like, I think Thomas said, like, probably talent more skewed on the offensive side than the defensive side. Like, they have got a lot of like inexperienced players, or a lot of players that have bounced around a lot on the defense. But like, fair play to them. Like, a lot of people mock Jonathan Gannon, like in the offseason. And again, like, I hate it when we kind of mock coaches before their team has even played a game, particularly because he got mocked on like a team meeting. And, you know, that's his personality. I'm not going to mock someone for that. I just thought that was like low-hanging fruit. So fair play to them, because like they are fighting for him. Like, you know, for as much as like you can say like terrible franchise and this, that, and the other, like, which I don't think, you know, you can say about other teams. So fair play to them. I think Dallas will be all right. They just got to work out their red zone offense more so than anything else. But fair play to Arizona. As I said, I think that's a fascinating decision now, because they could quite conceivably be 2-1. You know, they shouldn't have let that Giants game go. And suddenly, like, you're thinking 2-1, maybe only making a little bit of noise. Do we bring Kyler back? Like, that's going to be an interesting decision, and I suppose we'll find out the trajectory of their season when that decision arises. But no, fair play to them. Like they're fighting hard. They're kind of a patchwork team, but Jonathan Gannon's got a tune out of them, and you got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously saw the Giants game last week, and I thought it's obviously that thing where they're playing hard for the first half and then allowing their opponent to come back because they want them more play. Obviously, no one plays like that really. I thought it was going to be the same sort of thing this week where they get up early, they look all right, and then the Cowboys come back and it's fine because the Cardinals going to go, oh well, that's fine. We looked all right. We're playing hard, but at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to lose games and get the number one pick. But the Cowboys just didn't come back, did they? They had a lot of offensive line issues. They had a lot of offensive line players out. They just didn't play well, and it's probably one of those things where it's just a bit of a blip for Dallas. So, kind of a bit of a line in the sand for both teams potentially. Are the Cowboys as good as we first thought? Is the defense as good as we first thought? Potentially not. And are the Cardinals as bad as we first thought? Play maybe not, because like you say, maybe they're playing too hard. Maybe they've accumulated too many players who have too much pride to just go down without a fight. And everyone's playing for their future at the end of the day, aren't they? Whether that be in Arizona or not. So kind of interesting. One thing I wanted to come back on, Willow, you mentioned you reevaluating who your number one pick is. Did you go for the Cardinals first of all in our preseason?
I did. Yeah, I did.
And who would you bet in now?
Probably Bears. Like, I mean, I'm
that's fair. as much earlier.
As much as I want to sort of be sort of steadfast and die for my beliefs, I'm also fickle enough to change them after 3 weeks.
No, that's fair. And to be fair, I should have remembered that since we talked about it literally about half an hour ago. But I thought I'd get a bit more of a juicy answer out of you, but no, I didn't. I failed in my quest there, I guess. So yeah, no, Cardinals, like you say, it's good for them, because we've all been through these seasons, all three of us, through our teams, and it's just not nice when you just go through a season that's a bit of a hopeless season. So to get a win in a game that you weren't expecting to win is great for them. It's great for them fans who, sit up late at night watching these games. So good. I'm glad for them. Let's move on then into our meme moments, our memes or gifts for this week. Mine, I'm just going to kick straight off. Mine's the Simpsons stop. He's already dead.
Stop! He's already dead.
This was originally just about the Dolphins and Broncos, but actually it could be about the Titans. It could be about the Bears, and it also really could be about the Cowboys as well. So yeah, we'll take a quad box of teams there who could have been given the mercy rule a little bit earlier by their opponents this week.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. When I read that and sort of I started reading your thing, I was like, oh yeah, it's Dolphins. And then I'd like as this is going on, I'm just seeing you type in all of these.
That's exactly how it happened. Live on the sheet as we're going on.
I've never seen Succession. I know it's very good. I've been told it's on the list. I've got an extensive list of things that I have watched that I've got to watch that I will eventually get round to maybe one day. But there's one specific line that I know, I think it's Logan Roy. I love you, but you are not serious people.
I love you, but you are not serious people.
As I'm sat there watching the highest ever drafted tight end, a top 10 wide receiver, a top 10 running back, fail to receive passes and sort of run through a ravenous Lions defense. I'm sat here going, these are not serious people. How would you get 6 points with all of those offensive weapons? I don't want to get angry, don't want to get upset, but the Atlanta Falcons, until they prove me wrong, are not serious people.
And just to add fuel to the fire in a really kind manner, you obviously got Arthur Smith as your head coach, and you couldn't run the ball either, which was kind of
the one thing that he's tried. Yep. Don't this is a conversation for another day. Me and Arthur Smith are this close to falling out. So yeah.
Let's move quickly on then, and say we'll come to you to finish this off.
My one, when the Weeknd played the Super Bowl halftime show in the COVID season, and that meme of him, I don't know what he was inside, but he was walking like through like a maze thing. Yeah. And obviously he's looking, and then obviously it became like a GIF. That's basically my feeling on the Tennessee. Did the Tennessee Titans play this weekend? Like, I genuinely have no idea. So many other things happened. You know what it is? Like, I had like the Lions on TV and Red Zone on the phone. And kind of like you go to the Chargers game, or they'd go to Miami, obviously, or they'd go to the Jets or wherever. I can hardly ever remember seeing a positive Tennessee Titans highlight at all. So like where are they? Like, what Titans team are we going to get? Because they won in overtime in week 2 against the Chargers, and they gutted one out.
Yeah, thanks for that.
And then suddenly, like they go and score 3 points, literally don't appear on Red Zone at all. And I'm like as I said, it's the beauty of playing at 6 o'clock when you're really bad. There's so many other things happening. Everyone kind of forgets about you. That's the beauty of being a Lions fan that plays at 6 o'clock all the time. Everyone kind of forgets. And as I said, that's kind of what the Titans were. Like, I don't get like, well, what Titans? What's the real Titans team? That's kind of what I'm looking for at the moment. Like, because Mike Vrabel don't allow his teams to get beat badly like that. Like, I haven't seen the game yet, but 27-3 or whatever it was, Mike Vrabel, he's going to be throwing some helmets around in practice.
Yeah, 94 total yards. So
there you go. Like I said, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, like you said, not a great performance for the Titans. So yeah, I can completely see where you're coming from. So let's round this off then with our Monday night predictions. Just to kind of hark back to last week's predictions, I will proudly announce that I got the score bang on. Panthers 14, Saints 20. Brian Burns did not get 3 sacks, though, so I'll just take the 2 points rather than the 3. Just like last week, we've got 2 Monday Night Footballs this week, which is odd, very odd, almost as odd as me saying Monday Night Footballs, which just didn't sound right as it came out of my mouth. Tom, you went for Browns 21, Steelers 13. Kenny Pickett picked twice, 0 points, unfortunately. And Tabe didn't even have the good grace to turn up for the podcast, so it remains on one. That was not the reason. That's really mean of me to say that. It remains on 1 point for the season. So Monday Night Football this week is Rams at Bengals or Eagles at Bucks. So guys, take your pick. Willow, we'll come to you first for your Monday Night Football prediction.
Yeah, I need some points because this is not great. It's a very poor reflection on the touchdowns NFL expert Thomas Willoughby. I've gone for the Eagles to beat the Buccaneers 24-17. I don't really know who in the same way that I don't really know that Toby doesn't know who the Titans are. I don't really know who the Buccaneers are. They seem to be like grinding out wins, but I don't know who they've beaten. I don't know who they've played, and that's probably more to do with me than anything else. But they don't seem. I don't get the feeling around them that they are a serious 2-0 team. So the Eagles are primed for a performance that makes you remember who the Eagles are. And I mean, AJ Brown's probably going to make up for the lack of fantasy points last week with 2 touchdowns this week. So we'd go with the Eagles to do that. Yeah.
Would that make you a happy fantasy owner?
It would not. No, I've got their other receiver. I've got Smith. So I mean, my fantasy season's kind of in the mud a bit. So it would be totally in character for the Eagles to just decide to blank Smith when I need him the most. So yeah, that's where we're going. Yeah.
Dave, what about you? What is your prediction for this week's Monday Night Football? Like Rams Bengals is a really tasty game. Like Bengals' season's on the line, 0-3. Like I don't know how many what the stats are for 0-3 teams making a playoffs, but they're not good. They showed it during the Lions-Falcons game yesterday. I think there's like a 54% chance of 2-1 teams. I think it's less than 34 for 0-3 teams. The Bengals can't really afford to fall to 0-3. So I'm going to go. I'm probably too drunk on ballsy callsies, but I'm going to go for when Michael Jordan had the flu game. Going to go for, this isn't like an Ollie Hodgkinson ballsy callsy. Joe Burrow's going to have the calf game, and then he's going to win. Nice. The Bengals are going to win. Burrow throw for over 250 yards, throw 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And I think the Bengals will win 24-21. I think it'll be a close game. I think they're 2 pretty evenly matched teams. The Rams have started pretty well, but I just fancy the Bengals at home in like not a do or die situation, but you've got to get up and running. They've got 2 division losses already. Browns defense looks good. Baltimore look decent. Like they got to find a way of getting a win. I feel like maybe that desperation might kick in for them today.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a really good game. Just to kind of pick up on something that you just mentioned there. Since 1990, the odds of an 0-3 team making the playoffs is 2.5%. So, yeah, that's not high, is it? There's only 4 teams out of 158 that have done it.
It's must win for them. It's must win.
Yeah, pretty much. Even with an elite quarterback like Joe Burrow, at least he is when he's fully healthy, which he obviously isn't at the moment. That is asking a lot to come back from that. That's a big odds to fight against. Which I'm not going to back them to do. Nice little segue. Mine's also the Rams and the Bengals based. I'm going to go for the Rams to win 34-21. I think Burrow will play in this. I think they've said he's optimistic to play. Whether he should or not, who knows? But yeah, like we've talked about earlier, or like I've talked about earlier in the season, Sean McVay is just in his bag at the minute. I know Puka Nacua is a little bit hobbled at the minute. He's questionable. But I still think they'll put up points. I'm going to go for Tutu Atwell to get over 150 total yards because he's kind of been underrated because of Nakua's kind of explosion, hasn't he? Earlier on in the season, he's still been going for a lot of yards and being a massive part of their offensive game plan. And with Nacua, a little bit questionable. I think the ball goes to Atwell quite a lot. And like I say, gets 150 yards or more on this one. And like I say, pretty much ends the Bengals season, which would make a lot of people wrong in our group, including me, because I said they win the Super Bowl. And they're probably not going to if they go 0-3.
There is still part of it. Even if even if they were to go 0-3, I would still back them to somehow pull it back and go. And if we're say 3 weeks time, 3-3, we're just kind of like, oh well, they're on a roll. They're going to do this.
Yeah.
I've got Bengals sort of penciled as one of those teams that until they're kind of done this year, I'm not really willing to kind of write them off. So yeah, that's where optimistic enough that they can turn it around, even if they finish. You've got to be a really good team to do that, though. Like when the odds are stacked against you that much, you've got to be seriously good. They've got some good players. So yeah. Even when they lose tonight, they'll still make the playoffs. Don't you worry, Bengals fans. I've got your back.
Producer Kieran, obviously, is a Bengals fan. He's going to be absolutely glowing hearing you back say that when he edits the pod. We might clip that and we might just play that when they don't make the playoffs. I'm going to make it mine. Whether he'll do it because he doesn't want to do that as a Bengals fan, obviously, I don't know. But that would be nice. So yeah, we'll see. But yeah, lads, we've come to the end of another week on the pod. Let's just kind of close it out there. We've got some content coming up. Willow, you'll have your 5 wide coming out in the middle of the week. We're going to have some next gen stats. We're going to have some stars of the week. We've got winners and losers coming up probably before this pod drops or around the same time this pod drops. And then moving through the week, not only the NFL content with things like under and over reactions, man-on-man matchups from Joe. We've got all the college content for you guys. College football is kicking off in a big way. There's a lot of storylines in college football at the moment. And it's all going on here. Canadian football as well. One thing I need to start doing on advice of producer Kieran is telling you guys to like and subscribe. I feel like such a YouTuber. I feel like such a Gen Zer when I'm saying these things. It's not something of my age should be doing. But yeah, if you do that, it helps us out. If you're enjoying the pods, and please do like and subscribe to the content. And like I say, head over to Touchdown and read all our content as well. It's all fantastic. Give us a follow on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to go with Twitter at Touchdown NFL. But guys, thank you for joining us again for this week 3 pod. We'll be back next week. We'll see you then.